Welcome to the Let's Talk Kids Health Facebook Live Show, Episode 12. I'm Dr. Narissa Bauer, your host. I'm a behavioral pediatrician and blogger of Let's Talk Kids Health. The concept of this show is to share information about behavioral health and wellness for children and families everywhere. Each week, I plan to bring you topics and guests to help me advance this mission so that we can all talk together. This episode was pre-recorded and premiering live. Now, if you don't want to miss future episodes or maybe check out the past ones, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Narissa Bauer MD, and follow my blog Facebook page, Let's Talk Kids Health. Okay, so now to this week's guest. Dr. Jennifer Reid is a practicing psychiatrist and award-winning educator who specializes in treatments for anxiety and insomnia. She attended medical school at the Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons and completed her residency at University of California at Los Angeles. Most recently, she was the medical director of the outpatient psychiatry clinic at the University of Pennsylvania. She's also a blogger and podcaster at thereflectivedoc.com. Hi, Jenna.
Hi, happy to be here, Narissa. Nice to see you.
I'm so glad to have you on the show. As a practicing psychiatrist, I'm always curious to know what are the unique ways that you've been trying to help people with your psychiatric training?
Yeah, so one of the things I've really become interested in over the years is treatment for insomnia and different sleep disorders, in part because so many of my patients that were struggling with anxiety or depression or other symptoms were also having a lot of trouble with sleep. And I couldn't always address the sleep issues with the medications or treatment I was using for some of their other symptoms. And so, what I tend to do when something isn't making sense or I don't understand is I really dive into it and try and get as much information as I can. And so that's how I was able to find the interesting data about insomnia and treating that. And then the blog and the podcast are other ways to try and share information about mental health or mental illness treatments to a broader audience.
I love that. And we know that sleep is very intimately tied to our brain and how we function through the day. So I know there's a lot of viewers who are really interested in this topic. So I'm really excited to sort of continue this conversation. Um, so what is considered normal sleep patterns for children and adolescents? Let's start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the caveat is that I do treat adults primarily for insomnia, but in learning about sleep, I've really learned a lot about some of these patterns throughout childhood and raising my own children. I certainly understand the challenges of infant sleep all the way up to young children. So, when babies are first born, their brain really isn't developed fully enough with something we call the circadian rhythm, which is what tells us it's time for bed or it's time to wake up. And so they sleep on and off throughout the day and throughout the night,
Right.
leading to sleep deprivation in parents. Slowly, over the first year, they'll start to establish more of that pattern and be sleeping better and better with some steps back and a few steps forward. Then they get into, when they're young children, they're going to be going to bed a little bit earlier at night, starting to drop their daytime naps, and then sleeping, maybe waking up early in the morning. As we get into our adolescent years, there's a biological and natural shift to later sleep time. So this causes difficulty because you have your teenager who wants to be up on their phone or reading or playing games. And really, it's hard for them to fall asleep at 10 p.m. It's sort of like us trying to fall asleep at 7 p.m. as adults. So there's that shift, and then they want to sleep in later in the morning, and things get in the way, extracurriculars, school, all sorts of things. And so that's where later school times and things like that are starting to catch up a bit with the biology, but still not ideal. So those are some of the changes that can happen. And I do have a colleague who practices in New Orleans. She's called Sleepless in NOLA, that does sleep training for children and adolescents. And so I like to refer people to her since that's kind of outside of where my active treatment is right now.
Yes, and thank you for the introduction to her because I think she has agreed to be on the show. So,
Oh,
yeah,
wonderful. That's awesome.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. Well, so thanks for sort of, starting off and setting the stage because I think as parents, when kids are not sleeping, obviously they're not sleeping.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest issues that I see in my practice as well. So when I see kids for behavioral issues. So I think there is that question, though, for our viewers. What is and isn't insomnia? Like when you say that word, is it
Yeah.
more than just like not getting a good night's sleep, or can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So I think there is a lot of confusion about what insomnia is, and even more importantly, what it isn't. So what it is, roughly by our DSM, which is our diagnostic criteria, we're looking at dissatisfaction with the quality of our sleep. So that's important. It's not sleep deprivation, it's not number of hours, it's dissatisfaction with our sleep. We're not falling asleep when we want to, we can't stay asleep when we want to, or we wake up earlier than we want to. And lasting, anywhere 3 months or more, kind of by the standards, would be and 3 nights a week. But you can certainly have insomnia that lasts a few weeks or lasts longer than that. What I'm trying to do in working with patients is to prevent it from becoming chronic. So we're talking dissatisfaction with our sleep, fear as we approach nighttime sleep, a lot of anxiety or anticipation about sleep. But you may get actually a pretty good number of hours. It's just if you're going to bed at 9 p.m. and waking up at 10 a.m. and you've slept fitfully throughout the night, those number of hours don't really feel that restorative.
Uh-huh.
The thing is really different, though, is that this isn't truly sleep deprivation. There's a lot of news right now about sleep deprivation and not getting enough sleep and all the health outcomes that can affect, which is absolutely true. But that's different. That's when people really don't have sleep opportunity. They're working 2 jobs, they're going to bed at midnight, they're getting up at 5, they're doing that over and over again. That's different than insomnia, which is more, sleep that's not high quality and isn't satisfactory, but is different than sleep deprivation. So the health outcomes with insomnia, it certainly can affect mood and affect your daytime functioning, but it's not the sort of scary sleep deprivation issue that people associate it with.
Yeah. So thank you for that clarification because I think people use that word and I think there's that important distinction. So I
Mhm.
guess because I'm a behavioral pediatrician, I'm wondering, does insomnia happen in kids? Because what you just described was more of a subjective definition, like I'm not happy with the quality of sleep. But does that apply when parents are like, well, I don't like the quality of my kids' sleep. They're not sleeping when I want them to sleep. That feels a little bit different to me. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the interesting thing when they've studied insomnia in children and adolescents, and they're asking them, is it hard for you to fall asleep at night? Do you have trouble falling asleep? Do you wake up throughout the night? The interesting thing is that when you ask kids directly, when they're able to understand those concepts, they have to be a little bit older than toddler age, certainly, but they actually report trouble sleeping, trouble staying asleep at higher numbers than their parents even report. So the parents aren't even aware that the kid may be having trouble falling asleep or waking up throughout the night. And so it is really important as they get a little older to both ask the parent, but also for sure ask the child, are you having any difficulty with sleeping? And the rates, one of the studies I've looked at, maybe 30% of the parents were saying my child has trouble falling asleep or trouble staying asleep sometimes, and about 40% of kids in that study reported the same. So you're
Mm.
seeing there's a 10% disconnect there. So it is important, as I think for pediatricians, to really talk both with the parents and the patients about what their experiences are with sleep.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're advocating that we should talk to the kids directly and get their experience of this. Do you mind maybe elaborating further? I mean, what are some of the common causes of insomnia then in kids
Yeah.
that we should
So
be looking for?
good question. So, anxiety, worry can certainly interfere, right? Kids are getting into bed, and that's where they start to kind of think about what was my interaction with my friend today, or how am I doing with my schoolwork, or what am I anticipating that's going forward? So, really helping them learn that those are anxious thoughts, learning how to manage those anxious thoughts, which is a bit beyond the scope of this talk, but there are really wonderful tools for that. And I can certainly let you know a link to a book that I recommend for some of that.
Mhm.
So things like anxiety, but even just having a really, frequent changes in their sleep patterns, right? So our brains love to kind of establish a pattern. This is when I get up. This is when I go to bed. This is the ritual that I do before I go to bed. When your kids are really little, that's easy, right? You're giving a bath, you're reading a book, you're rocking them. You have all these almost like superstitions to kind of make sure you're doing it the same each time. As kids get older and even adults, we still need to have those reminders that this is that pattern. This is the time we typically go to sleep. And importantly, this is the time we typically wake up. So that's for kids and parents alike, that you keep that schedule, because your brain then anticipates, and it helps everything. It helps metabolism, it helps our immune system, it helps the quality of our sleep. So it's important to have those, structures. And frankly, sometimes there are going to be nights you stay up later or they stay up later or have different wake times, but it's less disruptive if overall their schedule is really pretty consistent when it comes to wake and sleep times.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm just thinking about earlier. I did see a client who the parents admitted, like, we have never been a routine family, and the teenagers, going to sleep at 3 in the morning on a
Mm.
school night. Internet is shut off at midnight. And the parents sometimes may not be awake anymore beyond that, but they wake up and hear him, getting up and moving around. And so they acknowledge the importance of sleep. But when everybody is sort of out of sync, that makes it a little bit challenging, and not knowing how to start if that's not been what you're used to.
Mhm. Right. And I think there are ways, that might be a bit beyond the scope here as well, but
Mhm.
to kind of help them reset. Like I said, teenagers just naturally, their brains are ready to stay up a little bit later at night. So
Yeah.
there's some different tools, even some supplements and things that we can use to try and help train that. But
Mhm.
overall, the process is just slowly work your way to a bit more consistency. And it may
Mhm.
be that you're getting up a little bit earlier each day for a few days. This is for adults and adolescents alike. It's much harder to get up a little earlier, or easier, sorry, to get up a little earlier than to force yourself to fall asleep earlier. It's almost impossible, and that's where we get into some trouble with insomnia, is working really hard at sleep. It's one
Right.
of those things in our life, the harder you work, the more difficult it becomes. So it's really counterintuitive, especially for those of us who are really type A, and if you work hard, if you want something and you'll get it, that sleep is really different that way. So it's
Uh-huh.
slowly shifting to more consistent patterns, and we're keeping it weekends and weekdays, because if you're
Mm.
sleeping much differently on the weekends, it's a little bit like jet lag, where your brain's saying, wait a minute, I thought I was going to bed at 10, now it was midnight. Should I adjust to that or stay with the original schedule? So it can really cause some confusion.
Yeah. Well, so I think the bottom line there is consistency so that you can cue your brain to be ready and able to settle when it's time. But also, sort of, if you're kind of in that needing to reset, it's always easier to start with getting up earlier, is what you,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, do it slowly. Maybe it's 10 minutes earlier for a week and then another 10 or 20 minutes or
Mhm.
something. Especially with a reticent teenager, that might be your best approach. And have something that they're getting up and doing, getting out into light as it's becoming nicer, warmer. Getting some of that bright light in the morning can really help. Again, that's how our brain determines, are we awake or asleep?
Mhm.
So really try and get some light and some activity that you're doing each morning, encouraging your teenager, maybe something they enjoy, could really be helpful to help them reset.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Well, that's a nice lead into our next question. So, are there any tips that you could suggest for helping just tired families everywhere? If you can solve this $1 million question, I think it would be amazing.
So I think one concept that's helpful for adults and adolescents and younger, a little bit older children alike, is this idea that sleep is one of our most powerful drives. You think about it, being asleep for 8 hours, not able to protect ourselves back in the day where we were living in caves, etc. That wasn't a great use of our time. It wasn't the safest way to approach things. So it makes you realize how important sleep is. And sleep is just going to take what it needs. So if you haven't been sleeping well, you're probably going to fall asleep for little micro sleeps during the day. It's greedy. It's just going to take what it needs. So the fear that you're not going to sleep, the fear that you're going to go days and days and days and nights without sleeping, it's almost impossible to do that. In fact, we can restrict our food intake much more readily than we can our sleep, because our brains just turn off and say, I'm sleeping, whether you like it or not. So really reminding both kids and adults that if you had a difficult night of sleep, the next night will probably be a little bit better, because you have this kind of buildup of fatigue and sleep need, and you're going to sleep a little bit the next night, or you're going to sleep a little bit better the following night. So that insomnia is really about a fear of not sleeping rather than truly the inability to sleep. So if
Mm.
a kid's saying, it's really hard for me to fall asleep, what if I'm really tired in class tomorrow? What if I can't do this and that? those sort of what if anxious thoughts can really drive further dread about anxiety for adults as well. So reminding ourselves, my brain's going to take the sleep that it needs. I have to give it ample opportunity to do so and really try and work on some of those worried or catastrophic thoughts that if I don't sleep, tomorrow will be catastrophic. If I don't sleep tomorrow, I might be a little tired. Okay, it's happened before. I've gotten through it. I've gotten to the next night. So a lot of the work that I do, and I think as a psychiatrist doing sleep medicine is really a nice pairing, is addressing those anxious thoughts and
Mhm.
really challenging this thought that if I have a bad night of sleep, I can't function. I'm totally dysfunctional. For me, if I have a bad night of sleep, I might snack a little more. I might be a little more irritable. I may not be able to do proactive activities like I would otherwise, but I'm functional, right? So it's sort
Mhm.
of pushing back on some of those ideas and teaching kids that even though it feels a little scary to have trouble falling asleep or waking up in the middle of the night, it's okay. It happens to all of us sometimes when we have stress in our daytime or changes in our schedule. Just normalizing it. You're going to have some nights that you don't sleep as well. It doesn't have to mean that this is going to go on forever. And just breaking that cycle of fear and dread can really help with sleep.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of that. I can see that cycle and that dread that if you've
Mhm.
perhaps like you have a kiddo who has a test the next day and they're laying there and they're so anxious about that test, but then they don't sleep and then they're looking at the clock and they're like, oh my gosh, if I don't go to sleep, I'm not going to do well. And then it just sort of cascades, right? You're really talking about
Yeah.
not just looking at sleep as sleep itself, but looking at the anxiety that usually is present and treating that anxiety and that cognitive work as well.
Exactly, because they are really vigilant at night. Really, if you're
Mhm.
anxious, you're trying to stay awake and your brain thinks, oh, okay, something's a threat, that test the next day or whatever's coming
Mhm.
up. And your body naturally is going to keep you awake, right? If you were truly under threat, if someone was breaking into your house, you'd want to stay awake. You wouldn't want to doze off when you were hearing something that was worrisome. That's how we're built, that's how our brain
Mhm.
works. So, what we're
Mhm.
trying to do is tell our brain, it's okay, I'm safe. If I don't fall asleep for a little while, okay, it's not the end of the world. I will sleep the next night or the next night. So it's really trying to see that it isn't going to be a catastrophic outcome, even if you sleep poorly for a night or two.
Right. Well, so I can imagine that there are viewers out there like thinking, wow, this is amazing and I need some good sleep. Um, do you have any way for our viewers, our listeners to get help for their insomnia without paying for one-on-one sessions?
Yeah, it can be expensive to do it, even though there's a treatment called CBT for insomnia, so cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, getting at a lot of what I'm talking about here. So restructuring your sleep so you have higher sleep efficiency, meaning the time you spend in bed is asleep, as opposed
Mhm.
to 10 hours in bed, 7 of which you're asleep. So there are different techniques to really optimize that. There are techniques to pair bed with, that's somewhere I go to sleep and just feel really restored and it's wonderful, as opposed to I'm falling asleep on the sofa, I go up to my bed and I'm suddenly feeling really anxious or overwhelmed. So it's
Mhm.
something called CBT for insomnia. And because the number of providers out there, there is a shortage. I'm working on a course that I'm calling Sound Sleep Within Reach that really describes a lot of what I'm talking about today, like teaches people about sleep in general, but
Mhm.
also really describes the CBT for insomnia that they can then apply in their own lives. And I'm hoping to try and disseminate this information to as many people as I can. I also do coaching one-on-one with people on this. But again, time and expense can be a little bit more challenging to find that. So I'm hoping to start with the course, but if people want a little bit more of a deep dive, I do work with adults in this area.
So is your course available now or is this and where can they get information about this?
Yes, great question. So we're working on launching it probably within the next month or two. And what it's going to be is just different informational videos and things where I'm talking through some of these questions. The best way right now as we're building out that site and that course would just be to go to the reflectivedoc.com. You can sign up for the email list for part of the blog, and I'm going to let everybody on that list sort of have first dibs at the course and then also some coaching. Or you could email me at thereflectivedoc.com at gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. And how long is the course itself?
So the course is going to be, you really can do it at your own pace. So
Uh-huh.
once you sign up, there are a series of different modules you can go through, do it at your own pace. As a busy working mom, as you are as well, you got to find time to do this. So I watch things while I'm, folding the laundry or making dinner or whatever it is. So I wanted to have it really accessible and for people to do at their own pace. So I've designed it for people like me who just have a lot going on time-wise.
Mm-hmm. So just to be clear for the viewers, this course is really for adults
Mm-hmm.
to take and to work on their own sleep habits, which
Yeah.
could trickle down, right? If you're a mom and you're showing your kids as far as like the priority you're putting on yourself for sleep and the importance of sleep, and the messaging that you talk with your kids about, it can help really set the stage for everybody in the household to make sleep a priority.
Absolutely. And really learn that these techniques, I mean, they can help people in just a few sessions when I'm working one on one, but help them get off medications, stay off medications. It's really remarkable how effective this treatment can be. So I'm such an advocate because I know our sleep meds don't work that well. They can have a lot of side effects. They don't actually mimic normal natural sleep. So I'm really trying to get this information out so people aren't on Ambien or some of these other meds for years and years. If they do decide to stop those meds, they obviously need to talk to their doctor about that. But there are some just different ideas about what they should be asking about and how to approach that information.
Well, hopefully those folks who, go through the course will all be rewarded with a better night's sleep. And, just I think in general, that will help so many people who are currently so stressed right now because of COVID, everything that's been happening in our world today. I mean, obviously there is a great need for this course. So I really hope that people will check it out and, access it, listen to your podcast and subscribe to
Yeah.
your newsletters.
Well, that sounds lovely. I'm hoping as many people can learn about this as possible because it is the number one recommended treatment for insomnia. It's just really hard to find it. So that's why I'm creating this. So thank you for being so positive about it.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It was such a pleasure to talk with you. And as you know, this show was pre-recorded. So I know that Dr. Reid has promised that if you are watching this live, please use the hashtag live so that we know that you're commenting on the day that this is premiering. And then if you're watching this on replay, anytime after that, please use hashtag replay. So that way, when either of us are going back through the comments, we can quickly identify whose question hasn't yet been answered. So thank you so much. I'm going to just put those instructions here so that way people remember that. Again, because this was pre-recorded. And I do want to say, because as you know, I like to always announce my next week's guest. So next week's special guest is Dr. Kelly Slama McManus, who will talk with us about parenting the quote, defiant child. I do want to also say too, registration is closing soon. My Teach Me ADHD course registration for class starts April 18th and 19th. They're almost full. So if you are interested or want more information, please head to that link there on the screen and or drop me a message on social media and I can give you more information about that course. All right. Well, so as always, if you have any other suggestions for future topics or guests, please feel free to reach out to me at letstalkkidshealth at gmail.com or drop me a message or comment below. I'm happy to take in any topics that you'd like. And remember, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, Narissa Bauer, MD, to be alerted whenever I go live each week or follow my blog Facebook page.